Misuse of FBI informants in the Whitey Bulger investigation, destruction of CIA evidence, as well as ongoing criminal leak probes. Sources tell Fox News that Durham is focused on the months leading up to the election, including the use and initiation of informants, whether it was based on solid evidence and properly predicated, as well as irregularities in the October 2016 surveillance warrant application for Trump campaign aide Carter Page.
Fox's Catherine Herridge reporting. Increased concerns about the security of the Persian Gulf, fingers being pointed at Iran.
Iranian-aligned Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed they targeted vital Saudi facilities with drones. Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. is still investigating suspected sabotage of Saudi tankers. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif calls the sabotage suspicious and suggests the U.S. could be behind attacks like that.
Fox's Rich Edson. This is Fox News.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep Celebration event at Cars Plus in Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories with the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler, Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep Celebration event going on now at Cars Plus in Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
Get 2 Pepsi 12 packs for only $8.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a Pepsi 12 pack for only $3.49 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See store for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get 2 Coke 12 packs for only $8.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy.
An appearance in court for the suspect in last month's synagogue shooting in California.
John T. Ernest pleaded not guilty to 109 federal hate crime counts connected to last month's shooting at the Chabad of Poway Synagogue. A U.S. Justice Department release breaks down the federal charges as 54 counts each of obstruction of free exercise of religion and violation of the Hate Crime Prevention Act. The remaining count is for damage caused by arson. Ernest also faces state charges of murder and attempted murder for killing one and injuring 3 others on April 27th. A conviction on either the federal or state charges could mean the death penalty for Ernest. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Perhaps you've wondered, what is sexy?
So you tell me, is this sexy?
You really do talk like that. Who would make this up?
And of course, the one and only Fran Drescher with her world-famous Long Island accent, which was actually ranked dead last on this list. Travel company Big 7 ran a survey among its social media users, ranking 50 different types of American accents. The sexiest accent, according to this survey, belongs to y'all in Texas. Another big surprise on this list, the Boston accent.
Hey, I brought you some cigarettes and beer from Jackie's Packy on Route 34.
That was rated second sexiest in this wicked interesting survey. John Saucier, Fox News.
Actor Tim Conway has died.
Why are you trying to go through a locked door?
You told me to.
If I told you to jump out the window, would you do that?
No.
It's too bad. I had some hope for that.
Conway played second banana to Carol Burnett on the show that bore her name. He won 4 Emmys for his comedic timing. Tim Conway was 85. His publicist telling those who loved him that he suffered for quite some time. This is Fox News.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant.
Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know that. I know that. Certainly the real Joe Cruz knows that. But I think I've stumbled across somebody here in national politics who apparently doesn't know that. And his name is Cory Booker. He's one of... how many are there? 50, 100, 150 Democrats that are running for the nomination for president on the Democrat side. He's one of them. He's the former mayor of Newark, New Jersey. He's the senator from New Jersey right now. And I stumbled across this article in Bearing Arms, Tom Knighton. And the title of the article is this: Cory Booker wants to sick the IRS on NRA. Are you familiar with that word, sick, real Joe Cruz?
Yeah, you usually say that when you want your dog to attack.
Exactly. Sick 'em. Yeah. Right. If you got a pit bull, right? A pit bull named Mac. And somebody's giving you a hard time. Sick 'em, Mac. Yeah. Well, Cory Booker wants to sick the IRS on the NRA, the National Rifle Association. Cory Booker has decided to make gun control a central part of his platform as he runs for president, basically stealing the anti-gun spotlight from Representative Eric Nukemal Swalwell, who we've had a chance to chat about here on Tall Tales also. As Booker is a far more viable candidate, this will likely sink Swalwell's bid in the long term while giving Booker something to hang his campaign hat on well ahead of the first primaries. Part of Booker's plan, however, seems to be all about targeting political enemies, in particular, the National Rifle Association. There's a quote: Democratic presidential candidate and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker is promising to investigate the NRA's tax-exempt status if he becomes president. Booker wrote a column in the New Hampshire Concord Monitor Sunday in which he promises the most comprehensive gun violence prevention plan in decades, and brings the fight to the NRA like never before. The senator also plans to unleash the Internal Revenue Service against the pro-Second Amendment organization. Beginning on day one of my presidency, I'll take action to close dangerous loopholes in gun sales, crack down on unscrupulous gun dealers and gun manufacturers, and invest in communities impacted by gun violence. One of those places would be the place he used to be mayor, Newark, New Jersey. And I am immediately calling on the Internal Revenue Service to investigate the NRA's tax status to determine whether the self-dealing and other activities recently reported in the press should lead to the revocation of its tax-exempt status, Booker wrote. I wonder if he'll bring Lois Lerner in to be the director of the IRS. Lois Lerner, you'll remember, is the one who exercised her Fifth Amendment rights before a congressional committee when she was asked about targeting nonprofits that had certain key words in their names, like Tea Party, conservative, etc. So going back to the editorial, the idea that he's admitting to targeting an ideological opponent with government action should be troubling, and not just to gun rights supporters. And this is what I say repeatedly, you know, it's more than about just the Second Amendment. It's about constitutional rights, the Bill of Rights, protecting them, looking out for folks that will try to take them away. Here's one. If Booker were to be elected president, which isn't likely to happen, he's admitting that he'd use the power of the presidency to order a federal agency to target a group that opposes him. Now, you hear the word fascism kicked around a lot. This is an example of fascism. The idea that the NRA should be targeted by the Internal Revenue Service and essentially shut down, something anti-gunners have been advocating for weeks now, would set a precedent that no one should want to see. After all, there won't always be a Democrat in power. What if the next Republican decides to return the favor? Goodbye, Planned Parenthood. So long, Brady. Hasta la vista, Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, some of these wouldn't exactly break my heart, but I don't want them to disappear because government agencies targeted them. I want them to disappear because the public no longer wants to support their ridiculous efforts. That's it. If Booker gets his way, the door is open on this. The gloves come off and all else becomes fair game. So whatever the administration in power doesn't like, you could use the full coercive force of the government, the IRS, the FBI, and whatever else, to target those people that you don't like. That should scare the hell out of anyone. Well, I'm not going to vote for Cory Booker, I'll tell you that. However, it should be noted that Booker's not the first to think of this idea. It's not like the IRS hasn't targeted the groups the president opposes before, and that goes right back to Lois Lerner, doesn't it? Okay, so that's tall tales, and the lesson here is that we have to protect all of these constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment, because there are always those who will have a better idea, a newer idea, a more modern idea than those things that we've determined were sort of immutable principles that we didn't ever want to see go away. We made those determinations back in 1791 that there are some things that are always true at every place all the time, and that would be our Bill of Rights. But as you can see, Cory Booker's got a better idea here. So that's why we do the Second Amendment is off every day. This is a constitutionally oriented conservative talk show, and I don't think it's probably going to change very much in the near future, or the distant future for that matter. Okay, the next item we have on the card is called what, Real Joe Cruz?
Zemi Kutney.
Oh, there may be a few people that haven't been part of our international radio listening audience long enough to know what we mean when we talk about Zemi Kutney. So could you enlighten them, Real Joe Cruz?
It's a backwards play, bilingual play on words.
Okay.
Which simply means meet the press.
Meet the press. We
press the meat around here.
We press the meat. Meet the press. Except you don't have to wait for Sunday morning to see it here on Tall Tales. So we examine the editorials of the two papers. I have my blue pencil here if I need to do any editing. I will award the coveted blue star to the editorial that is the better of the two. And if I catch the editors of an editorial plagiarizing, I've got my red pen. Unfortunately, I've had to use it a couple of times.
Ah, the coveted P.
Yeah, the dreaded,
the dreaded
P. Yeah, yeah, the scarlet letter, the big red P. So, yeah, it's just something you never want to have attached to your name. I wouldn't want to be known as Robert P. Klitzkie, that's for sure, if the P stood for plagiarism. Well, so we're going to go from red to green today at the Daily News. Something else that I don't get really very excited about either, but let's see what the Daily News is saying. They're saying, taking vital action on green laws. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, boy, this must be something that AOC has written. She of the Green New Deal. Gov Guam needs to enforce environmental legislation. It's pointless for senators to create more laws intended to help protect the environment if they won't provide funding to make them happen, or if the government fails to implement or enforce the measures. Despite legislation being passed to require the recycling of bottles, a zero-waste plan, and rules for Guam Recycling Revolving Fund, Guam has spent a great deal of money and effort on laws and studies that have yet to be enforced, said Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, as she casually tossed her empty Coke can out of her car. No, I'm just adding that to make the editorial a little more. She didn't throw her empty Coke can out of her car window. She's talking about the recycling law, which was enacted in 2010, amended in 2013, and still hasn't been implemented. Lee said the net effect of failing to enforce environmental laws is more than the lost opportunity to do better. It's a loss in public confidence, the senator said. Despite laws on the books prohibiting littering and the illegal dumping of trash, both occur on a far too frequent basis. Okay. On a far too frequent basis. Beaches that get scoured of trash during a volunteer cleanup are soon once again packed with garbage and refuse. All of this indifference doesn't bode well for other environmental legislation. In June 2018, the island enacted into law a measure introduced by Lee to ban disposable plastic carry-out bags from being distributed by stores beginning January 1, 2021. While a plastic bag ban does not require new administrative rules, it does require strong enforcement, and that is where the old habits must give way to new thinking, Lee said. So you can't expect to go to a grocery store and walk out of there with a plastic bag full of groceries that you could use for about 100 things when you get home, including throwing the trash out, carrying things with you that you don't want to get wet when it's raining. Well, a plastic bag ban, if the plastic ban is to work, it needs to have more teeth. It will require the government to invest in making it work, including enforcement personnel who do their jobs rigorously and regularly. Now, in the era of Paul Santos Mofnis Jr., do we want to concentrate a lot of our efforts on enforcing the ban on plastic bags? I think the one is more important than the other. It will mean holding those that break the law accountable for their actions. Well, I'm ready for that one. I can give you some candidates right now. How about let's start with the CCU. It sets standards for what could and couldn't be tossed into the trash as you were, recycling on Guam improved tremendously when the former federal receiver took over all solid waste operations. It set standards for what could and couldn't be tossed into the trash, and the receiver enforced the rules. The government of Guam needs to adopt the same sort of mindset and ensure that not only is environmental legislation passed, but that enforcement is a critical component. Well, yeah, it's important. I don't know if it's as important as certain other things that are bothering all of us right now. And certainly I'm a law and order guy, so even if I don't happen to like the law, I do want to see it enforced or properly assigned to the right agency. So I can't say that I really qualify as a greenie. And I've been called a lot of things in my short 80, but environmentalist wacko was never one of them. And I probably won't start down that path right now. So that's the Daily News. Then we have the Post. And the Post is talking in terms of apology. You know, nowadays in the 21st century, the most important thing that a kid can learn in school as to how to properly apologize. Because whatever you do, you know, no matter where you are or whatever you do, you are going to be around snowflakes and people with really tender feelings. And the ability to perfect a proper apology. And a proper apology is one where you soothe the other person's feelings without really admitting that you're wrong. And now this is not something that's really, it takes a lot of training and a degree of skill to do it exactly right. Now, this is also compounded by the problem that on the left, a tool of argument is taking offense. So if you are a lefty and someone is arguing with you about capitalism or intersectionality or identity politics or neo-Marxism or all of the things that the left embraces, and you make a point that the lefty doesn't agree with, he will not just say, I don't agree with that because blah, blah, blah. He'll say, I'm offended by that. Which means that you're supposed to apologize and then just shut up because you have committed the cardinal sin. You have offended somebody. Now, I don't know. I got a feeling that the folks over there at United are not card-carrying lefties. They are, in fact, in the capitalist enterprise. They're trying to make money by flying people from point A to point B. So I don't think they're that easily offended. But here's what the editorial says. This goes back to Bobby Alvarez. And Bobby Alvarez said something that didn't sit too well with the Guam Visitors Bureau. And here's how it starts. While Alvarez's comment may be viewed by higher leadership in GVB as bad for the tourism business, the government agency also must know to respect its employees' right to speak freely on a public issue from their personal viewpoint. I don't remember the exact words that Alvarez said, but he said that, I'll paraphrase something along the lines that when United replaced Continental, we didn't get a really very good deal because United is not as good as Continental was, and it hasn't done a very good job of serving people here in the island. So, while Alvarez's comment may be viewed by higher leadership in GVB as bad for the tourism business, the government agency also must know to respect its employees' right to speak freely on a public issue from there. It says employees, so I guess I understand the word there in this context. A lot of times when I see the word there, I really don't understand what it means, but I do know. Right off the bat, we can think of a number of incidents that could have merited apologies from the Guam Visitors Bureau leadership or our elected officials. When tourists get mugged and lose their money, phone, vacation photos, and passports to thugs while vacationing on Guam, it might give the guests a little bit of consolation when GVB finds a way to express apologies for their bad experiences. When tourists experience distress while sightseeing in public parks because public restrooms are padlocked, that is an embarrassment that could merit an apology from GVB. And when tourists get ripped off with false promises of a paradise experience on Guam that turns out to be anything but because of moldy or roach-infested accommodations, or there's trash everywhere as they tour, GVB could probably offer a gesture of apology for that too. So we're using the kind of the tu quoque approach here, and you too, GVB. There was, however, a recent incident that didn't require a very public apology from someone in the leadership at GVB. His boss, GVB President Pilar Laguana, also announced Alvarez had been counseled. He had been counseled. I don't think you've ever required counseling, have you, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir. No, sir.
Well, here's my counsel to you. Keep up the good work. The profusely expressed apology stemmed from a personal post that Alvarez made on social media about United Airlines. Alvarez made a comment that certain of his family members' experiences with the airline have been a disappointment. Part of his post, which has since been deleted, stated, quote, "I think United needs some competition and a lesson in customer appreciation and customer service. United has been nothing short of a complete disappointment since its inception on Guam." Well, I have a confession to make. I was really sad when Delta flanged it up because I always flew Delta. I did not want to fly United. Now it's kind of hard not to. Alvarez was stating an opinion that based on initial reactions to the Guam Daily Post reporting, some Guam travelers happen to agree with. And while he does not get his paycheck from GVB, while he does get his paycheck from GVB, which values United for providing key air links to Guam from a number of tourism markets, urging Alvarez to offer a public apology might not have been the greatest idea. Perhaps you remember these movies about a colonial America, Real Joe Cruz, where in the village square they had these things called stocks. And the stock was a wooden contraption.
To put your head in your and
put your head and your
in.
arms in there, and then they lock you in there, and they put you in the stocks.
Yeah.
As an example to everyone else as to what not to do.
Yeah.
Maybe GVB could invest in a set of stocks down at their office down there in Tuma, and then they wouldn't have to force people to apologize, and they probably would have a significant behavior modification effect on their employees.
I agree, and I think it would be good for tourists as well. They love taking pictures in those
Yeah,
things.
it'd be a great photo opportunity, wouldn't it? Folks could stand beside Bobby Alvarez in the stocks and have their pictures taken.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Now the editorial has a subheading here: a chilling effect on free speech. GVB's reaction to what Alvarez posted on his personal Facebook page could discourage Government of Guam personnel from freely voicing their personal thoughts. While there are limitations in the workplace on what an employee can say to or about his or her employer. Now, I suppose I should edit that, right? Instead of using his or her employer, what should they have said?
There.
Yeah, right. 21st century, after all. This might not be one of those cases. How GVB reacted to Alvarez's personal post may be an effort to defend United and to avoid harming a major partner in the tourism industry. But it's also not good for GVB to be overly sensitive to the point of stifling someone's constitutionally protected right. Yeah, well, I'm going to get to that because we have had a lesson on this before. Pickering and Garcetti and Conant, right? I'll come back to this right after this short break here.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, you can talk, you can post, and if you're online there, how about clicking on that share button up on the top of your Facebook page? Treat all your Facebook friends to some really good radio listening right here on Tall Tales. Okay, so going back to the editorial, Tom Spiggle, S-P-I-G-G-L-E, Tom Spiggle. It sounds like something you'd stick in a water tank if it's leaking, doesn't it? Hey, look at that big leak. Get me a Spiggle and stick it in there. Yeah, I'll probably get some. Is the Tom line open?
Wide open, sir.
Yeah, this guy's name is Tom Spiggle, so I'll probably catch some flack for that remark from any one of a number of Toms, right? Tom Spiggle, an attorney who writes on workplace rights, wrote in Forbes magazine in September 2018 that a government employee publicly comment on an issue of public concern may very well be protected under his right to free speech. It's what being said is subject to a legitimate news topic and is being said as a regular citizen rather than as an employee. Then the speech is more likely to be protected from government employer interference. Spiggle wrote. Is that Tom Spiggle outside the... No.
No, it was Spats.
Okay.
Or Shats.
Somebody who wants to be on the Shats list?
Yeah.
All right. So while Alvarez's comment may be viewed by higher leadership in GVB as bad for business, the government agency also must know to respect its employees' right to speak freely on a public issue from their personal viewpoint. We think this event offers a chance for United to turn the story into something positive. Nothing is stopping any airline from improving its customers' experience and winning the support of more Guam flyers along the way. Okay, so get out your Law and Order notebooks here. And we've been through this before, but it bears repeating. The government is bound by the provisions of the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. Even state governments are. However, when the government is acting as an employer, as opposed to acting in a governmental capacity, the standards are a little bit different. And government has more latitude when it's acting as an employer than when it's dealing with a citizen as a citizen. So the government, as an employer, can use its authority to make sure that there is order in the workplace and that whatever employees do or say is not disruptive to the operation of the organization. On the other hand, an employee who is speaking in his private capacity about an issue of public concern better not mess with him, because then you're getting into what's potentially a constitutionally protected right when the employer is the government. If it's a private employer, no, there's no right to free speech for private employees, private and business employees. But for the government, there is. And I explained that there's a 1960-something or other case called Pickering versus Board of Education, where a teacher named Pickering was either opposed to or in favor of a bond issue that was before the school board in his town. The board wanted to borrow money to build something or didn't want to borrow money to build something. I don't remember which. And Pickering was very vocal in his criticism of the school board and the way they were handling that bond issue. Well, the school board showed him. They fired him. And it was a case that went all the way, as they say, all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said he's speaking on a matter of public concern. He's not talking about his own personal grievances. Who better but a teacher to speak out on matters such as the one he spoke out on? Put him back to work and give him back pay. Now, ironically, some of the things that Pickering said were not correct. They were false. But the Supreme Court said because they were not knowingly false, or Pickering shouldn't have known they were false, it didn't make any difference. First Amendment, as far as government employees are concerned. He was a public school employee, and I think it might have been Peking, Illinois. I'll go back and look one of these days. Then there was a case called Connick versus Myers, where Connick was the district attorney for Orleans Parish in Louisiana. He took over after, I can never remember the guy's name, but the district attorney that prosecuted people for the assassination of John Kennedy. It's a really good movie starring Kevin Costner. Well, that guy got beat, and then Harry Connick Sr., the father of the musician, was elected, and an employee who probably was not the easiest employee to get along with in the workplace was critical of Connick, and she circulated a petition amongst her co-workers in the Orleans Parish DA's office evaluating Connick. Connick found out about it and fired her. And the decision was, you're just trying to chase down your own grievance. You're not speaking publicly as a private person on a matter of public interest. So it's a good bust. You're out of here. Pack your desk and go home. And then Garcetti versus somebody put that on the website the other day because I couldn't remember the name. It started with a P. Garcetti versus somebody along the same lines said that if you're not speaking about a public issue in your personal capacity, if all you're doing is griping about your own job, no protection. So if Bobby Alvarez had said, United Airlines doesn't serve Guam very well, I have a hard time dealing with them. They never return my phone calls, etc. That might not have been protected speech. But the way it was reported here, he wasn't, it didn't appear that he was talking about his own working conditions, his own Facebook account. and talking about a matter arguably of general public interest, the service of United Airlines. So the editorial makes a really good point, and one that's, I think, often overlooked, one that I think is really important, because how many times do we hear this? Did you know that at the Department of XYZ they're doing ABC and EFG? No, hey, why don't you do something about it? Oh, I didn't want to because I don't want to lose my job, or I didn't want to because I know so-and-so. So we wind up tolerating a lot of stuff that we really shouldn't tolerate because people put up with stuff that they have no business putting up with. So if we can't tolerate a Bobby Alvarez and his kvetching about United Airlines, we're never going to get past that. And until we get past that, our government will be limited in the kind of service that it provides. Because it doesn't take very long for tyrannical government officials to figure out, I can kind of do whatever I want to do and nobody's going to blow the whistle on me because no one wants to come out publicly and do that, so I'm okay. So good editorial on the part of the Post to flesh this out and I guess provide something of a text for today's lesson. So as I mentioned before, if I happen to go along with the editorial policy, it's not necessary to get the blue star, but it doesn't hurt. If I'm really not too hot on the editorial policy, doesn't mean you can't get the blue star, but it doesn't help. So here I've got a green editorial that I think it really doesn't ring my bell that we should get all excited about plastic bags when we have so many other serious problems and so many other laws that aren't being enforced. So I'm not saying I could never give a blue star to a green editorial, although I remember when I was a kid, my mom always told me, when you get dressed, Bobby, green doesn't go with blue. Did that happen to you too, Real Joe Cruz?
Yeah.
Yeah. So green doesn't go with blue. So I'm not saying that could never happen, but it's pretty unlikely. On the other hand, when you start talking freedom of speech, constitutional rights, hey, I'm right in there. That sound that you hear in the background is me clapping as I'm reading the editorial. So not much suspense today. The Post. And I think that takes the Post up to 111 to 40 for the Daily News. Let's see here. Now 113. Yeah. Okay, good going. Post. So from there, we go to the card. I guess the Post editorial was so inspirational. Yeah, you did open up the Tom line, didn't you? Okay. Tom, I'm going to go with Louis first, since you have been such a regular customer. I think maybe I'll give Louis the first crack at it. Good afternoon, Louis.
Yeah, Bob, real nice discussion. Question, if I'm following what you've been saying correctly, there's protection for government employees, but I believe you said, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no protection for private employees.
That's right.
Does that mean to say, generally speaking, that, if I work for XYZ company that's private and I testify on some government issue and my boss doesn't like the stance that I took, even though I made it very clear I'm testifying as a private citizen, not representing the company, that the boss could take action against me, possibly including firing me if he or she so felt that way?
Well, I'll give you a definite maybe on that one, Louis. When you testify, say, at a legislative hearing or in court, certain privileges attached to that testimony. And I'm not clear on whether that privilege would immunize you from discipline on the part of your employer. I suspect it would, but I'm not sure on it. So don't go to the bank on that one, okay?
Right, but the implication is very chilling in that it implies that employers could have some sway in influencing negatively our constitutional rights to free speech.
Well, remember, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't say Congress. Let me get my Constitution out here.
Point well taken. Point well taken.
Yeah.
An angle that I think a lot of us just don't consider in terms of the right to free speech is that Congress shall not impede it. But that doesn't mean, what I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't mean nobody can impede it.
That's exactly right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, etc., or abridging the freedom of speech or the press. And that through some selective incorporation, that provision also applies to the states. But no, if you work for Macy's, this is kind of dated now. If you work for Macy's, you better not be walking down the street carrying a sign that says "Buy at Gimbel's."
Got it. Unless, of course, you subscribe to the philosophy of Miracle on 4th Street. That's another discussion.
It worked for them, didn't it, Louis?
It did. Hey, point well taken, Bob. I learned something today. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Louis. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Okay, and then we've got a Tom on the line here. Which Tom have I got here, Real Joe Cruz?
The real Tom, sir.
The real Tom, not Tom Real, but
no, sir.
The real Tom. Okay, Tom, what do you got?
Not the El Camino Real one. Anyway, I call up about another subject, but let me talk about what you and the caller just finished talking about. Private employees that work for private companies do have some protection under the law, right? Because I just read an article where a pregnant woman sued because she wasn't given reasonable accommodations.
Yeah.
And she won the suit.
That goes back to our so-called Civil Rights Act of 1965. And there are so-called protections like the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, some of these things. But for speech, no.
Oh, yes, yeah. I guess you guys were talking specifically about the free speech, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, but anyway, wasn't there an incident here in Guam where Mr. Atkins was denied his privilege that he felt like he was allowed by the Constitution to take a photograph of an accident?
Yeah.
He was told to surrender his camera or his film by the Guam Police Department, and he won that suit, didn't he?
I think he did, yeah.
Okay. Because we the public have a right to do whatever we want out there on our highway, because the highway belongs to us, belongs to the people, except when we should not obstruct the investigation, right?
That's right, Tom. And driving really, really slow in front of me when I'm in a hurry. There ought to be a prohibition against that too, I think, but there probably isn't.
Okay, are you in a hurry right now?
Go ahead, Tom. What do you got?
Okay. I called up about an article that I read in today's paper that written by another Tom Nichols.
Okay.
He was blasting Donald Trump for not knowing how international economy works. I feel like he's the one who doesn't understand. He was saying that President Donald Trump does not understand how international economy works because Donald Trump wants to increase the tariff on imports from China, when all Donald Trump was trying to do, he was trying to make it fair, because the Chinese are imposing a 10% tax of American goods into China, but yet the U.S. is only imposing a 4% tariff on Chinese products coming into the U.S. So Trump wants to increase the tariff of the Chinese imports into the U.S. up to 10% to equal. But yet this guy, Tom Nichols, made a saying that Donald Trump don't know what he's doing. He should not be doing that. Am I correct?
Well, I'll say this, Tom. Tom Nichols' opinion isn't worth a penny.
Yeah.
Well, it's, you know, classical economists are going to tell you that free trade benefits everybody and that the tariffs are not good economic policy because if country A sets a tariff in place, country B will retaliate, and we would benefit more from free, open international trade.
All right, buddy, we're running under time, so I hear the music in the background. I'll talk to you later, all right?
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Tom. Thank you.
Bye.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and Urgent Care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Ready to buy real estate on Guam? Congratulations! But what now? There's so many questions, so many things to do. Where do you start? The best place to start is to call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty, Guam's biggest name in real estate. They aren't the best because they're the biggest. They're the biggest because they're the best. Trust the name. Find out why. Call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty today. 888-2121. Trust the best.
So here we are. We got about 8 more minutes of that big halftime show that everybody is so eagerly anticipating. I go now to the card, and the first item on the card is Moylan versus Paul Santos Mofnis Jr. And the title is Mandatory Castration for Sex Offenders Sought. Yeah. A new bill seeks to make chemical castration among Guam's sex offenders released on parole mandatory rather than optional or voluntary under a 2015 law that's never been enforced. It's not even a green law, and it wasn't enforced. Amazing. The intent of the legislation is to add more teeth to an existing mandate. Maybe they ought to hire a dentist to come down there and make some dentures at the legislature that they could insert into some of these things that they pass so willy-nilly. The objectives are not only to reduce recidivism among convicted sex offenders, but also keep the community safe, the senator said. Moylan's bill would make the hormone program, also known as chemical castration, a requirement for qualified sex offenders. I wonder what a qualified sex offender? It must mean he's been tested and gets good scores on a test, and passed a physical exam, and has a good resume. Qualified sex offenders who are released on parole, probation, or post-sentencing provision. The drug treatment program is meant to help reduce the sex drive of convicted sex offenders. The new legislation seeks to update and strengthen the Chemical Castration for Sex Offenders Act, which became law in 2015 but has never been implemented because rules were not adopted. I should have given it to the Mayor's Council to draft the rules for that one. It would have been done. During a May 6 roundtable discussion about Guam's parole process, officials said the 2015 chemical castration law could not be implemented because there was a lack of funding and a lack of doctors willing to administer the program. They also noted mixed studies about the program's effectiveness. Under Moylan's bill, the sex offender would also be required to pay for the treatment program. Bill 137 says sex offenders who qualify for chemical castration program would be those who are diagnosed with DSM-5 paraphilic disorder, were convicted of a first-degree criminal sexual conduct, and the victim at the time of the crime was a minor. Corrections and judicial officials recently said changes have been made over the last few years to help protect the public from repeat sex offenders released from prison, including the establishment of new programs. So there it is. Is the Tom line open?
Wide open, sir.
Yeah, I don't see I don't see that light lighting up over here. Green light. No, okay. So Jim Moylan has pretty much established his position in the legislature as Mr. Reactionary. We have a heinous crime come along like Paul Santos Mofnis Jr., and Moylan's reaction to it is, let's have mandatory castration. There is a lot to talk about as far as mandatory castration, and I wonder if this is another kind of Hail Mary pass approach to legislation, like, let's let the Mayor's Council make some rules and see where it goes. I've mentioned before that I have a theoretical problem with castration, chemical castration. I am not a statist, and I see the state, the power of the state. The state is the only part of our society that is permitted to use violence to achieve its ends. So I'm not so sure that I'm crazy about the idea, no matter how serious a crime wave, that we should use state violence in the manner that we would have to if we're going to use chemical castration. And then there's the slippery slope. Suppose that some hotshot comes along and says, you know, I've discovered this anti-kleptocracy drug, and if you inject somebody every week with this drug, he will never steal anything. You could turn him loose in the Bank of Guam vault with a shopping cart, and he would walk out of there and not take anything. And maybe we come up with another drug that deals with violence. You know, and I know these kinds of drugs exist. There are drugs like Haldol, that will take a rather violent person and turn him into something that looks like a zombie really quickly. So once we start down this particular road where we think that it's okay to modify behavior by empowering the state to use various kinds of chemicals to reach that end, I don't know. I just really have a hard time with that being something of an anti-statist. I want to come back and pick up on that, and then we'll go into the rest of the card. I've got Comfort versus Joey Duenas, The News versus Justice Torres, Melvin Wanpat, Bora versus Apathy. Pretty interesting card coming back after the break.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Strictest in the nation. I'm Del Walters, Fox News. The state Senate in Alabama passing what could be the most restrictive abortion law in the U.S.
It would essentially outlaw all abortions unless the mother's life is in danger. Now, abortions in cases of rape and incest would not be legal if this would become law. It's considered the strictest bill in the country. As you said, it prevents the procedure at every stage of pregnancy, beginning at conception. The bill follows similar measures in neighboring Mississippi and Georgia. States like like Ohio and Kentucky also have similar measures. Now, this bill punishes not only women for having an abortion, but would put doctors in jail too, in some cases up to 99 years.
Fox's David Spunt reporting another controversial abortion bill in Pennsylvania, this one designed to protect unborn children diagnosed with Down syndrome.
The Republican-controlled House passed the bill Tuesday. A similar measure died in the state Senate last year. Supporters say it protects a vulnerable population and carries exceptions for rape, incest, and the mother's life. But Democratic Governor Tom Wolf says the bill interferes with the doctor-patient relationship. He's promising a veto. Other critics say it's ham-handed, unenforceable, and unconstitutional. Several other states have enacted similar laws, but they've been blocked by courts. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
San Francisco coming face-to-face with a growing controversy.
The city of San Francisco becoming the first to ban the use of facial recognition technology. It's part of broader legislation that orders city departments to spell out details of any surveillance currently in use and any they hope to use. The legislation bans use by city departments, but not personal, business, or federal government use of Face ID technology. Those who support the ban say the technology is not only flawed, but a serious threat to civil rights. Opponents say the police need help catching criminals. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
This is Fox News.
We know too well the inconvenience of not having power after a storm. You worry about food in the freezer going bad. Nights get hot. It's hard finding comfort when going to sleep. These are realities. But with solar and battery storage from Micronesia Renewable Energy, these realities can be a thing of the past. The solar works during the day and the batteries power your home at night. Call 632-2613 to see how solar plus battery storage can make life a little more convenient. MRE, the smarter choice.
Travel the world and then some with the 2 million United Mile sweepstakes from First Hawaiian Bank. Enter and you could win the grand prize of 1 million miles or be one of 6 other lucky winners. The world is big. Our prize is bigger. Enter at fhb.com/2 million miles. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Sweepstake starts on May 1st and ends June 30th, 2019. Open to legal residents of Guam and CNMI. Ages 18 years or older. Visit 2millionmiles.com for official rules. First Hawaiian Bank. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
The president says it would be one giant step. The question is whether it would be a step forward or backward.
President Trump is promising NASA $1.6 billion to plan and launch America's return to the moon. Critics say the White House is diverting Pell Grant money for the program, saying it could jeopardize aid for future low-income college students and trigger a budgeting crisis. In addition to the plans to put American men and women back on the moon within 5 years, the administration wants to steer several $billion more from the Pell Grant surplus to other government programs. Opponents say the surplus is needed in the event of a surge in demand for the grants. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
Actor Bill Murray back at Cannes.
Bill Murray's zombie flick, The Dead Don't Die, makes its premiere as the opening film of the 72nd Cannes Film Festival, which arrives with the usual swirl of celebrity and controversy.
Anybody accidentally kills anybody in a fight, they go to jail.
Other films making their debut at the French Film Festival: Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the Elton John biopic Rocket Man, all male-centric films, despite last year's protest for gender equality by 82 women on the festival's famed red carpet steps. Artistic director Thierry Frémaux signed a pledge promising to make the festival's selection process more transparent and to push executive boards towards gender parity. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
Is your city fit?
If your interests include walking, biking, or running, you may want to head to Arlington, Virginia. The American Fitness Index is out. Taking into account personal health habits, the D.C. suburb propelled to the top spot thanks to access to walking paths, bike lanes, parks, and rec centers as well. It also has low rates of smoking, diabetes, and heart disease. Seattle is number 2 on the list, followed by Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Madison, Wisconsin. Many Florida cities were docked because of dangers for pedestrians. Oklahoma City came in last.
Fox's Kevin Battle reporting. I'm Del Walters. This is Fox News.
Ready to buy real estate on Guam? Congratulations! But what now? There's so many questions, so many things to do. Where do you start? The best place to start is to call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty, Guam's biggest name in real estate. They aren't the best because they're the biggest. They're the biggest because they're the best. Trust the name. Find out why. Call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty today. 888-2121. Trust the best.
So here we are again, the second half of Tall Tales. We've all had a chance to enjoy ourselves during that big halftime show that we had. Lady D, I hope you enjoyed your popcorn during the halftime show. And let's see, I'm back picking up here with castration. And before the break, I explained that I have some real difficult philosophical, as it were, problems with the state coming along and using chemicals to modify behavior, as much as I hate the crime that it's directed towards preventing. But let's see what Ken has to say about castration. Ken, go ahead.
Well, back in 2015 when this bill was first proposed, I testified against it. I pointed out it was a blatant political campaign balloon, and it's still a political campaign balloon because, you know, I mean, it's an attention grabber. Senator Moylan wants to castrate sexual predators, you know, but it's not practical. We had it on the books, and nothing happened, and for the reasons I testified. First of all, where is a prisoner in Guam going to get $25,000 that it takes to do all the testing and the first round of shots?
Ken, let me jump in here for a second. Ken, this information is available where?
I got that information off the internet. I was looking at other chemical castration programs, looking at the cost, the process, the implementation. I don't remember the exact one, but if you do a Google search on sexual chemical castration, you'll see a bunch of programs. So I took the information from there.
Senator Moylan could have availed himself of the same information, correct?
Correct. And the other part was, I think Moylan's bill doesn't have the prisoners paying for it, but has taxpayers paying for it, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's the inmate would have to pay for it himself.
Well, I'm just trying to visualize. That's the same thing Brant McCready tried. So I'm an inmate in prison. Where am I going to get $25,000 for the initial examinations and testing and everything? And then where am I going to get $1,000 a month for the shots?
I think that the general public has this mental image, Ken. The person is sentenced, he goes to DEPCOR, someone with a white coat on and a stethoscope around his neck sticks a needle in his arm, and maybe every month after that he sticks a needle in his arm, and it probably doesn't cost you much more than $10 a pop. But that's just not correct, is it?
No, the medicines are $1,000 a month.
Wow.
You know, and not only that, but they're massive chemicals. And the second question I had for the senator was, McCready at the time, was who is medically liable? Because if we're injecting massive doses of chemicals in this person, and the side effects are cancer, brain loss, neurological damage, blindness, high blood pressure. I mean, there's a whole list of side effects with these chemicals, and death. So who's liable? And the third question I had, these programs report that this treatment is effective between 50 and 2% of the time. So that means 50% and 98% of the time the treatments don't work. So what's the point in doing this program if we've got a 50-50 chance at best, a 98% chance at worst that the whole program doesn't even work?
Interesting points. And
that's why I call it a campaign bill.
Yeah, well,
see, it would have been a better bill if it said, Senator Moylan introduces a bill that says those convicted of sexual crimes must serve their entire sentence.
Well, if I were going to deal with it, I would find certain crimes that would be life without parole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone who molests, and you see this in the paper all the time, someone who sexually molests a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, I would prefer that to sliding down this slippery chemical castration slope for the reasons that I mentioned, coupled with the reasons that you mentioned. And I did list this item on the card as Jim Moylan versus Paul Santos Mofness Jr., highlighting the opportunistic nature of his introduction of this bill. Had it not
that's
been,
why I say it's a campaign bill.
had it not been for the Mofness incident, I got a feeling this was not on Jim Moylan's long-term plan.
Well, that wasn't the original reason why I called you. I attended the CCU meeting yesterday, and at the CCU meeting, Joey Santos made a declaration that he was not going to release any information until a court ordered him to. So I filed a writ for mandamus today on that exact subject.
Wow.
I mean, he's the one that told me to do it. So I did it.
And the writ of mandamus compels Joey to, what, release the documents?
Release the documents and recording of the illegal, of the executive session during which the pay raises and bonuses were approved.
Okay. So the writ of mandamus lies when a government official does not comply with a mandatory non-discretionary duty. I suppose Joey is going to say that he has discretion. That's kind of the way he's behaved himself at these meetings.
Well, that's where we have a tendency to disagree, and so I listened to what he had to say at that meeting, and so I decided that maybe I should take him at his word there, because not only has he not responded to my FOIA request, he was very surprised to discover he even had it. But that shows another problem we have at government at Guam. We have all these government officials who rely primarily on their personal emails. But when you look at the instructions for the FOIA, you know, we're supposed to send them to the authorized representative as declared on their website. And so that's what I did. So filed it today. And
Ken, who's representing you?
Tom Fisher.
Wow. He's been down that road before, hasn't he, with Ray Tenorio and Steve Ignacio. Steve Ignacio learned a $1,000 lesson.
Yes, and hopefully this will serve as a pattern for all the boards and directors to pay attention to, because first Mike Borja, and now Steve Ignacio, and now we have Joey Duenas in the line. And it's very important that we address the arrogance of some of these people who think that the people work for them, when the reality is they're supposed to work for us. The CCU board is supposed to be elected by us to represent the interest of the people over the utilities. But the way they act as if they are the partners, the managers, the owners of the utilities, and it's their little private fiefdom. But that is not the way the system is set up. So I think by taking this action here, we can send a message to all the boards that, you know, you have to remember who you report to, you know.
Well, that's good, Ken.
That's very important.
Yeah, and something else that I hope starts to dawn on members of boards and commissions, that the rules for boards and commissions don't start out with the phrase, once upon a time. In other words, the rules are not fairy tales. Like, well, everybody knows that if it's a personnel matter, you don't have to disclose it. right?
Well, that is part of the reason why I decided to go ahead with this process, because as I'm sitting there in these board meetings, specifically the board meetings at CCU, and listening to how much they don't know, and some of those people have been in there for years and years and years. You would think after they've been in there this long, they would know some of these things, like how to hold a meeting, what they can and can't talk about in executive session. Joey Duenas was surprised to learn that when a meeting's resumed, he has to post a notice on the board that the meeting was resumed and when it would resume.
For a recessed meeting, yeah.
I mean, recessed and when it would resume.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he was surprised, and he made the statement in the board meeting, I'm reading the law and I'm learning a lot. Well, I think it's kind of late considering how long he's been there.
And the harm that has been created by this whole executive session hide the ball flap that they've engaged in. You know, they've dribbled away literally thousands of dollars worth of credibility for no reason at all.
Well, they've also dribbled away thousands of dollars of taxpayer and ratepayer money, because when you attend these board meetings, these meetings have a lot of people in there from the utilities. They have attorneys in there. I've yet to meet an attorney that sits in these rooms for free. We had 3 attorneys in the room yesterday.
3?
What did that cost ratepayers?
You had the Conflicts Council, and who else?
The Council for the Power and the Council for Water.
Probably there is to provide expert testimony on when you can have an executive session, huh?
I think they already failed that one, which leads me to, so I'm going to petition that maybe what we should do is get rid of these attorneys and rely on the offices of the Attorney General, because I can't see that $400,000 a year worth of work between these guys, you know. BJ had a bill that he tried to introduce several times where it would prohibit agencies and autonomous agencies from hiring contract counsel. That they would.
Are these 2 guys contract counsel, or are they employees? They must be employees of the 2 utilities.
Well, that was a part that I wasn't quite understanding, because they kept talking about our contract arrangements, you know. So I'm not sure if they are employed or if they were contracted. You know, that part I wasn't sure on, but, you know, they tossed, that was one of the questions they wanted to get clarification on. Did these rules apply to their contract employees? And my assumption at the time was that the contract employees are probably talking about maybe the attorneys, because I didn't see the GM under a contract, or the waste manager, a water manager under contract, or any of the other people under a contract.
Well, they may very well be, but again, that's the kind of thing that the CCU should be very upfront about and let us know that these, you know, that it's not just a salaried position, it is a contract, and what the elements of the contract are.
Well, I paid attention at the meeting. I'm following up on the suggestions that were made at the meeting, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, good on you, Ken. I'm really glad to hear that you're filing a writ of mandate to get to the bottom of this thing. Very good job.
Oh, thank you. I'll let you know how it turns out.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
So the next item, I guess we talked enough about castration. The next item on my card is, in fact, a continuation of the CCU matter, and I will, in the process of discussing it, yeah, let's see, we got a caller on line 1 here. That's a caller who wants to make his mark. Okay. Hi, Mark. Hi, Mark.
Senator.
Hi.
I don't want to make my mark, but I need you to probably enlighten me and educate me.
Okay, I'll try.
And that was the latest that came out, that one of the board members' wife received a raise that he voted for.
That's true. That's how it came out.
Okay, now, is that not a violation of a code in the Guam Code, that what he did was illegal?
Yeah, it would have been. And this is a little bit involved because Mike Limtiaco was elected in November and sworn in January. His wife was already an employee there, and his wife had been given a raise in November before he was ever on the board.
Okay, so then he voted to remove her raise.
That's right.
He shouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, it's a point, isn't it? It is a point, and perhaps he would have been better off not addressing the matter at all. Although I suspect that everybody out in the peanut gallery was clapping when he did it.
The way it should have been done, and I'll harken back to something that I saw years ago when I was back in the States where I grew up and was watching one of the district school board meetings. And one of the school board members, and in the States, and in Ohio, the school board hires and fires the staff and faculty. Teachers are hired by the board. He made a motion that when it came time, or during the approving the agenda, that when it came to the personnel report, to remove this one individual's name because it was his daughter-in-law. So what they did is they had like 150 names. Well, they removed her name, so he was able to vote on 149. And then it came around and then voted for her, and he was able to recuse himself because of the conflict.
Yeah.
So what they should have done is had all those that Limtiaco was not related to, he gets to vote on, and then the one that he is related to, he recuses himself, and it's a separate action.
It's logical, Mark. It is.
Well, it's not logical. To me, it's just what is legally and ethically right.
Yeah, your point is that we think these rules are designed to prohibit someone from feathering his own nest with his vote by voting for his relative. But you're saying you shouldn't vote at all, to increase or decrease at all, right?
Correct. So that if the other members say yes, then he's recused himself, and so he has no conflict, no ethical issue, because he was taken out of that particular action for that individual.
That's a good point, Mark. The point that I raised when I saw this was that Joey Duenas horsing around so much with these minutes put Limtiaco in an awkward position, because if Joey hadn't been playing hide the ball with the minutes, we would have all known that Limtiaco hadn't voted on his wife's increase. But I think probably everybody that read the story came away with it with the same understanding that you did, that Limtiaco must have voted on the increase and now is trying to make it right by reducing it.
Exactly. I have a phrase or a word I use. You'll never find it in the dictionary. I'm confuddled.
Confuddled.
Confused and befuddled.
Okay, can we add that to the tall tales vocabulary?
Absolutely.
Real Joe Cruz, would you please enter into the records that we are now permitted to use the word confuddled on tall tales?
So entered, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
It just blows me away. I just am absolutely blown away, and it's like, what could happen next? It can't get any worse. And the CCU is proving me wrong literally on a daily basis and then on almost an hourly basis, that it can get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, when every time they have a meeting, like I'm going to talk about yesterday's meeting today, and I'm always left with what can they possibly do now for an encore? But they always come up with something, you know.
They don't disappoint.
Nope.
And as I said a couple weeks ago, it's kind of, I swear down at Adelup, they must have a big wheel with every agency's name on it, and they spin it to see whose turn it is to be the stupid agency. And after a while, they will spin it again, and somebody else will step up to the plate and be stupid.
Yeah. Well, okay, Mark.
All right. I just wanted to, I was, like I said, I read it, and I was like, wait a minute. Did he approve that back in November? If he did, he should be in a heap load of trouble.
Really?
The fact that he voted to take it away, to me, he's in trouble.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Senator.
Okay, Mark. Well,
you enlightening me.
We'll keep listening to Tall Tales, and we'll try to help you overcome being confuddled, okay?
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Okay, so a new word in the Tall Tales vocabulary, confuddled. All right, so I want to talk about yesterday's meeting, and I'm going to use the Daily News, as you were the Post story, as a basis for that. And then when I finish that, I will enlighten you on the Sunshine Law request that I just got off this afternoon, another one sent to the CCU. Although it pales in comparison with Ken's filing a petition for a writ of mandate this afternoon at the Superior Court, which a writ of mandate means that they could either provide the minutes and the transcripts, or excuse me, and the recording, or come to court and show cause why they don't have to. So what that's going to mean then, it's going to mean we're going to once again get into the word krytarchy, K-R-Y-T-A-R-K-Y, krytarchy, which means rule by judges, which seems to be what they prefer. So since they've got some pending litigation now, then they can go into executive session, take their lawyer, have a court reporter there, go through that whole rigmarole, and they can do their litigation strategy in there, so they'll even be harder, they'll even be more secretive than they are now. The other side of it is that a writ of mandate ordinarily moves pretty fast, so this, give it a couple weeks and we may be able to find out what they were trying so hard to keep from us. So let me just go through yesterday's, the story from yesterday's meeting. Starting out with Commissioner Simon Sanchez said the CCU was given prior legal advice that executive sessions discussions on pay raises were proper. That's what he said. So I sent a Sunshine Law request saying, let's see the papers. Let's see all the papers where counsel told you that you could go into executive session to discuss salary matters. And then we go on a little bit. Yeah, it's time for the seventh inning stretch. Well, I'm looking through this here to see where I want to go next. What we used to do during the seventh inning stretch, we used to watch Jack Haddock do some miraculous things on the baseball field.
Yes.
But I guess it was last week when he apparently went to the same school that the Shadow went to.
Yeah, it disappeared.
Yeah, he learned how to be invisible. So we'll be right back after the seventh inning stretch.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Do you know someone who is the best at what they do? Have you ever thought of being the best at what you do? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, I've got the formula for you to be the best.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Yeah, I wonder, once a guy gets used to hearing those applause every time he smacks the ball, it must be really hard to kind of get along without that excitement. But I guess Jack's able to do it. Okay, so then I go back into the notes from yesterday, talking about the November meeting did not just discuss salaries, but also evaluations, which CCU Chairman Joey Duenas said remain private. There have been several Freedom of Information Act requests for the executive session's recordings. The CCU has already denied one request from the Guam Daily Post based on evaluations being private. And I made a big deal out of how they denied it. The board secretary, let's see, her name is Bernadette Lou Sablon, denied Kevin's request, saying that the CCU denied it. It's a really interesting idea. So I sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the CCU, and I probed the idea of Ms. Sablon's denying Kevin's request. And I said, please provide as you were. Bernadette Lou Sablon responded to the Sunshine Law request thusly. It is the position of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities that the electronically recorded minutes of the executive session will not be disclosed pursuant to your FOIA request. This was the board secretary that wrote and signed this letter. And I'm asking for the minutes of the CCU meeting at which this decision was made. If the CCU has made a decision, then it's got to do it in a properly called and noticed meeting. And I'm also asking for the minutes for the showing that the CCU had delegated its authority to deliver the commission's decision. And I also wanted to see all the other FOIA decisions that Sablon has made. This is incredibly. I'll give them a break. I'll say this is incredibly sloppy. When a newspaper reporter writes and asks you for something that's clearly within the ambit of the law, and you might want to deny the request, but you can't just blow it off by having a secretary write back and saying, well, the CCU says you can't have it. And that's exactly what happened here. If anything else, it's just not very practical. I mean, that's not a very good way to build good media relations, CCU, and you certainly are going to need them now after the shenanigan that you pulled on November 27 with your executive session. And something else that happened, Sablon's letter to Kevin Kerrigan said, first, my apologies that this response is untimely and beyond the 4-day standard. Protocol dictates that FOIAs are channeled to general counsels for initial review. So I sent out the law, and then I asked for copies of the protocol that allowed Sublime to violate the law. So it's like we're dealing with a foreign kingdom here. They've got their protocols, and they apparently are able to delegate important decisions down to a secretary. So that's the reason that I sent this second FOIA. Then we go into a statement here by, here's what the article says. Deadlines for other FOIA requests are approaching. On May 27, the gag on the executive session recordings will run out, making them releasable to the public, except for the portion discussing personnel matters, according to Sanchez. Well, this is my FOIA based on that. Commissioner Sanchez is apparently relying on the myth that executive session minutes are only releasable 6 months after any meeting they reflect. The 6-month, quote, gag is set out at 5 GCA section C7. Here's the law. Under no circumstances shall a public agency hold an executive or closed meeting to discuss legal matters, impending matters, legal matters, or legal strategies with an attorney, except as herein provided below. All such discussions must be held in public meeting, and minutes shall be kept and open to the public except as herein provided. So unless you were discussing matters about impending litigation with the lawyer, there is no 6-month gag. Those executive session minutes and that recording should have been provided when Kevin Kerrigan sent in his FOIA. And they should be provided in accordance with my FOIA on Friday. That's the 4 days. If you were in executive session on November 27 to discuss legal matters, impending legal matters, or legal strategies with an attorney, then the requirements of 5 GCA section 8111 C1 through 6 are applicable. First of all, in order to hold a meeting, you got to have a written recommendation from an attorney and an affirmative vote of a majority of the members. And I want to see that. And then only the attorney, court reporter, board members, and executive director may attend the meeting. Now, we don't know who is in the meeting. It could have been those people, Snow White and half the dwarfs, for all we know, because Joey won't release the minutes. And maybe the reason he doesn't want to release the minutes is because someone was in that meeting that shouldn't have been there. Some Senator so-and-so, perhaps. Just speculating. Notice of the meeting shall be given as required for any other meeting. The notice shall indicate the place and time of the meeting and shall indicate the general subject matter to be discussed, as well as a specific exemption permitting an executive or closed meeting. After the meeting, the attorney involved must file an affidavit with the agency, which shall be a public document, that only matter relating to litigation or pending litigation has been discussed. There shall be public minutes made of all executive sessions indicating the existence of the transcript, the subject matter of the meeting, the names of all persons attending the closed meeting, their capacities, and the date and times the meeting started and closed. Those are all the things you got to do in order to have that 6-month gag rule in place, Commissioner Sanchez. And I also add, kind of in a prophylactic sense, I want to see all those documents. If they don't exist, then they got to write back and tell me they don't exist. But I want to see all the documents, and also I provide a caveat. 5 GCA section C 1 through 7 do not allow for a retroactive perfecting of the conditions precedent for an executive session. In other words, don't try to be cute now and say, well, that really, that was to discuss impending litigation, and we're going to put together all those papers now. No, you got to do it before the executive session. And since Ken has filed a petition for writ of mandate, you're probably going to get we ought to get pretty good at it. Given your track record, though, you'll probably try to slough through this like you did the November 27th meeting. So there's that. And then this is the part that it really gets my cork. This is in the news story. Dueñas said he was not comfortable releasing anything. He's not comfortable releasing anything. So I've scanned the law books thoroughly, and I've gone back in my 45 years experience as a member of the bar and my 50-plus years of being engaged in politics here on the island. I have never run across any position in the government that where the job description guaranteed the incumbent comfort. If you want comfort, buy yourself a lazy boy rocker and sit over here with the smart money who always seems to know more about what's going on than I do. But being on the CCU is not a place to look for comfort. You're doing the public's business there, Joey. Your comfort is not even a secondary consideration. He goes on and says, I think the best thing to do is go to court and let the judge decide. Little cry-tarky, anybody? Don't bother us with these things. A judge should decide. The fact that we are in charge of the utilities means nothing. And as I said yesterday, if that's Joey's bent, then we should draft a statute that does away with the CCU and lets the Judicial Council run the two utilities. He said, let a judge decide if those salary things are releasable, and let him do the releasing. Boy, Mr. Courage, huh? Mr. Public Spirit. And then, of course, I got to correct him on his usage. He's talking about letting a judge do it, and then he says, let him do the releasing, when he should have said what, Real Joe Cruz?
Them.
Oh, he should have said, let them, the judge, do the releasing. Dueñas, I don't want the liability of inadvertently releasing something by mistake. Dueñas said, for me personally, now when a person is a commissioner on the Consolidated Commission on Utilities, is it your personal wants and needs that should govern, or a spirit of public service? He says, I will tell you that I will not vote to release anything. Mr. Open Mind. I would rather have a judge release it. And the judge may say the discussion is so intertwined that none of it is releasable. I don't know. Well, you sure don't. That is the one thing that you said that I can agree with. You don't know. And, of course, the argument is that from the very beginning has been that the discussion of evaluation and the setting of salaries is so intertwined that it cannot be separated. It's all part of the same process. And of course, given the vigor with which they oppose us and the silly things they say in their meetings, one has to wonder, what is it that they don't want us to see or don't want us to hear that they talked about in that executive session? I'm not even going to speculate on it right now, but it must be something. It must be some kind of verbal dynamite, because otherwise, and I mentioned this yesterday, instead of dogging the attorneys, can't you find some way that we don't have to release this? The question should be asked, is it okay if we release the minutes and the recording? Is there any reason why we can't? But that's not what they want to do. I will tell you that I will not vote to release anything. I'm not comfortable releasing anything. So anyone who would petition the CCU for any kind of relief must remember that Joey Duenas' comfort is the touchstone upon which important decisions are made. If he's not comfortable, he's not going to do it. He doesn't care. Really a sad performance. So I set that out, and then for background, I set out the public policy of the territory that reads like this. This is at 5 GCA 8102. The legislature declares it is the policy of this territory that the formation of public policy and decisions is public and shall not be conducted in secret. The people of Guam do not yield their individual rights to the public agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. Now, Joey, you ought to memorize that, and you ought to say it every night before you go to sleep. And every time you feel a little bit of discomfort coming on, you ought to refer to 5 GCA 8102. So I set that out in my FOIA, and then I said, please provide such documents that show that Commissioner Duenas and other commissioners are aware of the policy of the territory which they serve. Because their whole performance here in this November 27 executive session does not show that they're aware of that policy at all. Self-interest and comfort are the only things that seem to be important to the members of the CCU. Then Vincent Leon Guerrero, an independent legal counsel, says that he is going to make a recommendation to file a declaratory action in the court asking for guidance on what to release. So I wrote back and asked, who will the defendants be? Because if you're going to go into court and ask for relief, you have to have a case or a controversy. That means you have a plaintiff and a defendant, or a petitioner and a respondent. So if you want to go into court, you got to sue somebody. So who are you going to sue? Big mouths like me and Ken Leon Guerrero because you don't like us calling you out on the silliness that you engage in at your meetings? Who are you going to sue? Because if you don't sue somebody, you can't go to court. It's just that simple. Of course, perhaps Ken has made that easier for you. Maybe he's answered Joey's prayers, unfortunately, relieving Joey the responsibility of doing his job. And then something else that came up in the meeting. Yeah, this is a report on Commissioner Judy Guthertz. Here's what Judy Guthertz was quoted as saying: "The value of going to court," Guthertz said, "is it would provide guidance to other agencies." And I asked, please provide documentation showing that the CCU, its employees or attorneys, have a responsibility to provide guidance to any agency other than GPA and GWA, which they don't seem to be very interested in doing. Oh, we want a judge to tell us. We don't want to release those minutes. Okay, so we're coming up on the home stretch here. Probably talk about this a little bit more before I go to the news and Justice Torres.
Okay, I think it's coming up soon.
Yeah, we're in Route 1 and near the airport intersection, right?
There, see it? What's the promo code? Look for the promo code.
Check out the Vantage Digital Billboard and reap the rewards. Catch the promo code on the screen and get $10 off your stroll ride by inputting the promo code on the Stroll Guam app.
Did you see it? You got it? I got it. You just focus on driving.
Take advantage today and take a look at Vantage Advertising's digital billboard located on Route 1 at the airport intersection.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 Data-to-Go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is Data-to-Go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
Well, that's the call to the post at Churchill downtown. I actually recorded that back in the days when the horse that finished first was declared the winner of the Kentucky Derby. But like everything else, that was then and this is now. So let's see. I've got a Michael on the line. Any particular kind of Michael? Oh, our Michael?
No, Michael Limtiaco.
Oh, Michael Limtiaco. Okay, good deal. Good afternoon, Michael.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
Good.
Good. Hey, I heard my name on the radio, so I'm calling in.
Yeah, well, you're famous, Michael.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, well, what?
Help you, Bob?
I beg your pardon?
I said, how can I help you resolve some of the questions that you might have?
Well, I don't have any questions other than wondering why a self-serving group of people are more why a self-serving person is more interested in his comfort than he is in doing his job. That there's no good reason to take the stance. Well, I want a judge to tell me to do it, when I think it's pretty clear that there's no good reason not to release the minutes and the recording. And as I said earlier, if there is a doubt, the way the question is phrased tells me an awful lot about the motivation of the commission in general. Maybe not you, but the commission in general. And that is, the question isn't phrased this way: can we release those papers to these people that have filed FOIAs? That would be one way to do it. Second way, can you give us good reasons that we don't have to release it? And that's the tack that the commission is taking.
Yeah, Bob, one of the first things I want to clear up is that, I was not a commissioner on the CCU during the November 27th meeting, right? So, I was sworn into office on January 10th, so I don't have any knowledge as to what happened at that meeting. I've even asked our conflicts counsel whether or not I have access to the meetings as a sitting commissioner now, because I haven't seen them. I don't know what transpired in the meeting, so I can't speak to anything that happened in the meeting. However,
just hang on there for a second, Michael, and that exactly proves my point. We're just dealing with an extremely cramped approach to a public duty, which is supposed to thrive on transparency and openness, and they won't even let you see the minutes. It just really proves my point.
Well, I agree with you, and if you review the minutes from the last two meetings, on more than one occasion, I have requested and made my opinion clear that those minutes should be released. Now, there's some commissioners on the commission that are of different opinions, and I need to respect that as a commissioner.
See, I don't need to respect that, Mike, because these guys ran for elected office, and when Joey Duenas makes statements like he doesn't feel comfortable and he's just not going to release anything at all, there's nothing there to respect. There's just someone attempting to feather his own nest and protect himself. I have a hard time respecting that.
Well, from my point of view, I need to have enough votes to pass a motion to release those minutes. So, understanding, where the other commissioners are coming from, and based on the conversations that we've had in the meetings that have been held, they're concerned about the liability for releasing personnel matters.
Can I stop you again? Personnel matters, and why is that important? To repeat this myth that personnel matters are protected. It's aggravating that people that have such responsible positions would repeat hearsay myths over and over again and base their decisions on that.
Yeah, Bob, my position with that is, we're relying on Conflicts Counsel to guide us on this, and Conflicts Counsel in yesterday's meeting provided case law that referred to that. Now, I don't want to get into a legal battle with you because I know you'd win. I don't know the law like you do, and I have to rely on our Conflicts Counsel and our legal counsel to make sure that we're steered in the correct direction.
They did a great job for you November 27th, didn't they, Michael?
Well, I wasn't on the commission, so
I mean the commission. They did a great job for the commission on November 27th.
Right. So, once again,
and then Conflicts Counsel says, well, we're going to go to court. And I don't know when you started listening, but I said, who are you going to sue? How are you going to get into court? Who will you file suit against? Me and Ken Leon Guerrero, because we're troublemakers? Because if you're not going to sue somebody, you can't go to court. If this is the quality of the advice that you're relying on. But I just will say one thing, Michael. A little bit of unsolicited free advice, okay? Being a member of a board or commission is something like being a senator. And senators communicate with their constituents by the bills that they introduce. And sometimes senators introduce bills that aren't going to pass, but they want their constituents to know that this is what they're about. So if I were a member of a board or commission, that board or commission, I would make a motion to release the minutes and the recordings. I'd make that motion, and if the motion failed, I've communicated with my constituents. That would be my 2 cents worth.
That I've done that, Bob. If you review the minutes, there's every single meeting that we've had, I've discussed releasing these minutes, and you're right that I do need to make a motion. And see if I get the votes, and I'm leading up to that. But I do need to go through the process of listening to legal counsel, having the other commissioners chime in, and that's part of being serving on this commission is making sure that I'm not a voice of my own for the commission. It's a group of commissioners that are contributing to this process.
Mike, I'm looking for leadership, and sometimes being a leader means marching to the drumbeat even when everybody else is out of step, and that's where you are right now. But I really appreciate your calling in, Michael.
Well, thank you for the time, Bob. If you have any other questions, I'm free at any time to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Abortion battle in